Hi, I'm Katherine of The Lakes, and this is Arts and Sciences for Adiantum. On the 26th of a month.
April.
April, apparently. Wanted and so there we go. So I made a very, very quick thing about beads. So there's two basic types of beads. There's drawn beads. They're often called seed beads. You'll find them a lot. And it's a strand of glass that is pulled after some form of a bubble has been put into the center, and they pull it really far. But we don't know how that bubble is put in the center of the mass. Nobody will tell anyone. Even today. So archaeologists. Sorry, what was that? Okay. They are cut by hand, traditionally at least. Nowadays you can get them cut by machines, but you'll get some variation in sizes. Though they are remarkably consistent with their cutting, traditionally. They are occasionally, they'll be reheated to soften the ends to make it round so they won't cut the string that they're beaded on, but sometimes they just leave them, particularly nowadays. And then the way you can tell if it's a drawn bead usually is there's small little lines that go parallel to the hole. This bead I have on the screen is a bead from a class I've taken at the U of O. One second. And it is in the collections, and it is from a looted collection from Saudi Arabia. And I've been working with that collection in particular, but you can see there's slight lines through it, and that's how you know it's a drawn bead. And some of them can get pretty intricate. And then there is wound beads, and those are called wound because they're wound around an object, usually a metal rod, and that's what creates the hole. Most other types of beads are a variant of this, so lampwork or molded are usually off of wound beads. You can really only make one at a time, but you can get really elaborate. Chevron beads are amazing. If you watch, you can look up videos, and they are so elaborate and take a lot of time and practice, and only like masters are allowed to even attempt them. Some have a strange end that kind of shows where the glass is being pulled off. We called it the little loop because we're very scientific in that class. And that was on, and you can kind of see that on the black and white bead on the bottom right. And these are both beads that are from my class as well. And that bead, it's kind of misshapen, and that's just from it being wound in a circle. And that's how you can tell is the small little lines are circular around the hole. And the blue bead, you can kind of see them. It's kind of hard to tell on the picture without blowing it up. But in person, it's quite obvious. And some of them, it's more obvious. This is, Grandma asked me to do this yesterday, so random knowledge. This is the peyote stitch, which is really quite fascinating because it's an off-loom bead weaving technique that's often used by Native Americans, but it has traces to ancient Egypt and particularly King Tut's tomb, mainly because it didn't get looted. And so those are some examples of some work that people have done. I couldn't find any specific examples from King Tut's tomb for some reason. the internet just didn't have it, but it's a flat stitch, and that was really quite an interesting random thing that you get to know now. And then, because I am studying anthropology, looted beads, just in case anyone doesn't know. When you're buying older antique beads, they could be looted. And I didn't know this until I took this class. A lot of beads will be bought by middlemen from in the country of origin, and then they'll sell it to someone else, and again and again and again until they make it to other countries. And then they're sold to shops, and nobody knows that they're looted, but they are. And particularly with today's internet, it's prevalent. So at least the best advice archaeologists currently have is don't buy the beads. So as much as, you know, the older beads seem like it'd be a good choice to buy, newer beads, at least you know they aren't looted. The image on the bottom left there is an example of what they would come in. Those are all looted beads. They just come in with these huge piles of beads that have been looted, and they sell them, and you don't know, and it's a problem that is still occurring. My teacher at the U of O works in Cambodia, and there are some glass baubles, and it's a it's really cool. I don't have any pictures, which suck, because it's really cool. But it's this it's kind of like a fishhook design, and nobody knows what they used it for, because we have never found it in any context. We can only find it in looted situations. So we're like, how did they wear this? What is this? We know it's old, but we don't know where it came, like what they used it for. So, and then resources, just citations, obviously.
Quote some of those so folks can do some research of their own.
The first one I got from Allison in Cambodia, who's my teacher at the U of O. She hasn't kept up on that WordPress blog, but it has some good links. And the other one is a column from a article from a newspaper in Thailand that somebody wrote. So, are there any questions of this weird presentation?
I have a question. You say that chevron beads are elaborate. Are chevron beads, in my mind, a chevron is up, down, kind of thing, a zigzaggy.
Mm-hmm.
Are they always like that? Is that the only thing that could be a chevron bead that's?
Well, it is, but it's layers and layers of glass, and it's
Okay.
layer. Ebony, go get it. 1 second, dog.
We're very informal here, folks.
Go get the dog. It's layers and layers of glass, and then they have to make it into the size of the bead, so it can start out huge.
And how do they make it smaller?
I don't know.
Do they draw it?
I think it's something to that form, but I'm not certain.
Okay.
I didn't have any chevron beads in my collection.
Okay.
It was, I was focused more on the chemistry of it than the how did they make it, but my teacher went over it.
So you talked about the peyote design, the weaving, and you could trace it to ancient Egypt and to modern South America. Is that accurate?
Just to Native Americans, it's
Native American.
Native Americans.
Okay, so that's a pretty broad range of time. Are there?
I don't know how modern it is. I suppose it depends on your definition of modern.
Well, it's still done, is what I meant.
Yeah.
So it has traveled through time, and certainly that means it would have traveled through space. You know.
Yeah.
It's been carried through trade.
Well, we don't know if it happened simultaneously. Like, did it start in Egypt and get traded all the way to the Americas, or did it happen separately?
There's no trail for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the the history, like I know, I heard you mention at some point that there were beads found in Europe that came from Egypt. If I recall, a blue bead or something like that.
I've been working on a collection of looted beads from. One second.
Everybody.
Of beads from Saudi Arabia, and those beads have both Islamic and European glass within them. And we're not quite certain if the glass came. So we also know that there are several beads that look very similar that sites have found in South Africa, which if you look at a map is very close to Saudi Arabia. So we're not certain if the beads came to Saudi Arabia from Europe or if they came through South Africa, just because they were looted. So there's no possible way to know, unfortunately.
Would you talk briefly about what kind of beads have occurred through times that you're aware of? Like, I know these are glass.
Stone and bone and shell are historically what people have used. We did not go into the origin of beads because that is probably that's like doctoral work on a bead because they're so complicated. But I do know that within because I'm working with a small subset of this huge collection, there are stone beads within it. But the beads I'm working with are the beads that were sent out for chemical analysis.
Anybody else with any questions?
Is there any evidence that peyote stitch was used in Europe during the medieval
I
period?
don't know. I have no idea. Another problem with that is people use fibers and fibers disintegrate.
Yeah.
The reason like Egypt is dry enough that stuff survived, on top of which King Tut's tomb is such a rare find because it wasn't looted. So I honestly, it's basically impossible to tell currently. Perhaps if we get lucky and find just the right bog at just the right time,
Yeah.
with just the right technology, we might know. But until then, it is unknown.
Did you bring any beads to share with us tonight besides what's pictured there? Okay. I asked that because I know she's been making beads, but they're not accessible, so we're not going to pursue that.
So what got you into your enjoyment and discovery of beads?
I took a class. I took a collections analysis class at the U of O. I'm currently writing a paper with hopes to get published this term. Theoretically, well, this year, we'll say, because that's what publishing is. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing with us.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I appreciate that. Catherine has midterms to get back to, so she's anxious to get away from us. Essays. What essays don't I have? So we're going to let her go. I have a few more things to share.
You want this down?
Yeah.
Oh,
So we're doing bling tonight because every persona in the SCA has some form of bling. And if we go back far enough, as early as man was putting furs on his body, he was decorating himself. We have evidence that has been found of stones that have had holes drilled in them, stones with evidence of having been wrapped, and they assume that that was worn as an ornament because they were very small. We have shells and bone and teeth that were used early on as bling. So as time went on and man learned to make glass, we got better bling. Okay, what was that?
Better bling.
Better bling, yeah. And then, as their old glass got left and maybe washed out to sea or kicked around the river, it became rubbed glass, washed glass. And that too became a new form of bling. So it got holes drilled in it. I have a couple other things to share with you.
Bonnie,
Yes.
200-year-old pottery.
Ooh,
African
pass
bead.
that down so we can show it in the camera. Helen has brought something to share. It's a 200-year-old pottery bead. Where from, Helen?
Well, they were trade beads in North Africa, but they originate in Sub-Sahara.
Look at the intricate design on that. That is amazing. And the design is still quite evident 200 years into its existence. That's pretty cool. Thank you, Helen. That's very nice. So what we're going to do is explore making bling for everybody's persona. Adiantum is primarily populated with Norse personas. That's probably well over 50% of our population choose a Norse persona. Norse finds are generally from grave sites. And as Katherine mentioned, they've been strung on fiber. So we find the beads, but we don't find generally how they were strung together. I think there are a couple of rare examples where they were found in a very careful order, so they were able to reconstruct. The interesting thing to me is our modern brain, when we string things, we aim for a symmetrical pattern. Tell me about this.
Oh, that's 1950s fake light.
1950s Bakelite. Things haven't changed all that much. Look at that. Same size even. Interesting.
So the Norse ones weren't symmetrical then?
The Norse did not generally string their beads symmetrically.
Ah.
Now, we didn't find them strung, so we can't say, oh, here's how they were. But when we find a collection of beads, if you found my necklace off the string, you would say, oh, look, there's matching beads all along here. I have 2 of these and 2 of these or 4 of those. It's not like that in the Norse finds. They're very random. So that's been an interesting aspect. Several articles I've read have mentioned that the Norse did not wear symmetrical necklaces. And when we recreate them, our modern mind says, oh, I like symmetry, and we go for that. But if we're going for historically accurate, probably not so much.
I wonder if that has anything to do with hand-produced versus mass production, that we're in a time where we can make many of the same thing, and it's possible that maybe they only had small quantities of something that was very limited, and
It is
maybe they
possible.
could only make just a couple of something.
Might also be that the beads are accumulated as special possessions, you know,
Yeah,
Kind of like a charm bracelet.
like a charm, I was thinking
maybe
that
as a
too.
charm bracelet or something of value.
Right.
We don't have a lot of the history on that written down, so there's a lot of speculation. When we get later into the SCA time period, we have much more accurate records through paintings
Right.
and a lot of sculptures. And we can see that they have gone to symmetry and much more bling, more sparkle, more sparkle.
Right.
So
What was that?
ouches are
Yeah,
something that was
me
used.
too.
Who knows what time period ouches came in? It left my brain. 1400s?
I have no idea. I haven't explored the jewelry for my
Okay.
period also.
An ouch is a decorative gem for clothing. And it's most generally a stone surrounded by pearls or by a metal setting.
Right.
And those are a little later period, but I still see those as bling. That's jewelry, that's ornamentation.
Why do they call them ouches?
I have no idea. If any of you know, please tell us. Jump right in here and say, I know, I know. Crickets.
No, I don't know.
Okay. Anya, do you have any clue about those? You are always a wealth of wisdom.
I couldn't hear the question.
Oh, do you have any idea of why ouches are called ouches?
No. Although I rather suspect it has to do something to do with pins that hold them on. That would be my guess, but I don't know for sure.
Do you think the exclamation ouch might go back that far?
I think it does. Anybody have access to an Oxford Dictionary?
We all do on our phones.
Let me see if I can look it up.
All right, thank you.
Why?
Cory has a question.
I'm just wondering why they pinned them on rather than sewing them on.
Because when you wash the clothing, you want to be able to remove it.
Yeah,
The clothing wasn't washed all that often on those elegant
Right.
gowns, but it still would be removed for washing.
They were not gentle. They're washing.
I guess I thought they were just like they were just.
Well,
on.
I speculate that that's very possible as well. That is not my forte, so I can't speak with wisdom on that. So does anyone else have any questions that we can maybe answer? One of the things that I find most interesting is that there is no time period when there wasn't bling. That through time, we developed more and more elaborate finishes on those objects, but it's the same object. It's stone, it's shell, it's glass, it's ceramic. We just have devised new ways of cutting them and polishing them to make them a little bit more sparkly. But it's still the same object. Don't know what else I would have made it from. Metal too, but I find that interesting. Time has passed. Yes?
May I speak to that from
Yes, please.
probably post-period, barely. Native Americans in New England, of course, had bead belts called wampum, and this was made from a very specific type of shell. Before contact, of course, these beads had to be made with stone tools. But one of the trade items that the English brought with them was steel drills, which were very much in demand. And almost overnight, the production of wampum exploded. What would take days, if not months, could be done in very little time. The specific type of shell that wampum came from almost became extinct. It was kind of a currency crash, if you want, where all of a sudden everybody had strings of wampum who used to have just very few that prized wampum. So when you're trying to figure out what something is worth, you have to try and figure out whether the beads were pre or post contact.
Okay, so the value dropped when it became more available.
Yeah, it's your classic supply and demand. When the supply goes up, the demand remains steady, then the value goes down.
Thank you.
I have an answer on ouch.
Oh, good.
Ouch.
1858 for the exclamation of pain. 1400s for the name for the item, the little jeweled piece. But it doesn't say any. It doesn't have any. I haven't found anything yet that says why they're called ouches.
I wonder if we used an old English translator, that might give us something.
Maybe.
I have misplaced my phone here somewhere and I'm not able to follow that up.
Can I help you? I'm not that old.
So we're being very informal. We've got at the other end of the table, we have a pile of beads and whatnot that's being assembled by anyone who wants to. And Tori, Dame Johanna, you should grab a handful of beads. We've got trays.
Well, I will do a little show and telling of these. I brought my jewelry box
Okay, I am checking Old English translation.
for bead storage. Because when you've been in the SCA for a while, one of the things we give out in on here is necklaces
Word not found, not able to translate. Thank you.
with awards at some level. And so they stack up. And then you go to an event and you're getting ready to event and you know, your necklace out and it's tangled with all the other necklaces. So my sisters gave me he found at a thrift store a silverware box and it was really awesome. It has blue and white inside. And
Ooh.
so
Can you bring that over to the
yeah,
camera?
I will. So I just recently figured out how to use it because there was just the open space for the silverware. But I started putting little sticks in between the slots, and then you suddenly get an actual kind of jewelry box effect. And then I use the little knife slots up here to wrap some necklaces on the sticks. So this is my Goutte de Song from the Kingdom for Kingdom level service. This is probably, well, this was made by, you would probably know the name, but I don't actually know the name. But when people saw my Goutte de Song, most everyone is getting shiny ones with little shiny drops. But when I was given this one, a whole bunch of people suddenly swarmed me and went, "Ah, you got a passed down one." Because this was from a very famous Ontarian jewelry maker from past days. He's the guy who was king and ruined his shoulder with the snap move. And I cannot think of his name. Anyway.
Well, if you can bring your tray down here, we'll
I
share
will
that
bring
online
it
as
in and
well.
show it down there for them too, so you guys can see it as well. Anyway, and then the drawer has other things in it, but with the same sticks. So just to give you an idea of like a way to get a cheap, very portable, and you can usually find silverware drawers, but they also, because this was for silver, it has the anti-tarnish fabric in it. So that helps keep the jewelry nice. This here is my pelican collar that was sent to me by her master Baron Jonathan of Atlantia, who created the score site. And it was sent to him as a thank you when I became a pelican. It was a surprise to me because I helped him write the how to use this fun guidebooks for his site that he's actually used throughout the known world for archery and thrown weapons. And I didn't realize I was being as helpful. I was just having fun. But apparently it was very helpful. And
But you
he's a
bring it
master
down
craftsman.
here because
I will. I just want everybody here to get to see it. So that's what this is. So it's apparently in Atlantia, their pelicans wear colors. And so,
Oh, that's cool.
isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
cool.
So, okay. I will bring it down so other people can see it.
Coming closer to the camera will also help the people who are
I'm coming
online
around.
hear what's being said.
Oh,
it's
no.
hard to hear you across the room.
Well, I'll come over here then. Okay, I'll tell you what I just told them. This is my jewelry box for SCA jewelry. It is a silverware box that my sisters got me. And I just recently figured out how to turn it into a jewelry box by putting sticks between the slots. And so that creates little pockets. Also by putting sticks here and wrapping the jewelry around it, then you keep them from getting tangled with each other. It works quite well. So I thought I would show that off tonight since you were talking about beads. Oops, sorry. And then, okay. And then this is the pelican collar that, isn't that amazing? That was sent to me
That
by
is just awesome.
Jonathan, who made it for my pelican vigil, and it was a surprise. He found out about it and sent that. So that's what, if you see that going around, you'll know why I'm wearing
Wow.
that.
because he's from Atlantia, and so the A's for Atlantia and Ontir together.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I thought you'd like to see that. This is, I was talking about my Gute song that is from a
Yeah.
craftsman in the SCA that I unfortunately his name I cannot think of it the second. I will probably go home and think of it tonight.
Was it third year?
I do that all the time.
It could be.
Or was it,
Like I said,
Heathen?
it's not Ulf Heathen because I know Ulf
Okay.
Heathen. But he was King of Ontir, so he's in the list somewhere.
No, that's not third year.
Anyway, so that is
Show you. Did you show?
yes. I showed them the box. So if you want to look in here and see, I have oh sorry, I have just for the fun of seeing. So these are my summits. I have one of each of the summits.
And are they
I will show
strung
these.
symmetrically?
These are, yeah, they were. These are not, nobody told these stringers that these are symmetrical. This one here, the princess Sumaya loved elephants.
Oh,
and so
pretty.
she put little tiny elephants on it. So we have, now the current ones look a little different. They are a molded poured pewter goblet, but the Summits uses a silver grail for their Grail Awards. And the red is service, the black is martial, and the green is arts and sciences. I'll pass these around if you want to see those. And I didn't string most of these because most of them were awards. This one was a throne favor. So a throne favor in most kingdoms is given by a royal just as a thank you for service. This was, oh, I hate that I'm terrible with names. This was from the Queen and Mary Grace, from Queen Mary Grace, because I painted banners for her and she loved them. And this is a silver barberry, which also comes in different forms from the Summits Princess. And one of the cool things about the SCA is you have sort of a general framework and then people get to do their own style on top of it. So if you're making something, you're like, well, I don't know, it doesn't match everyone else's. That's totally fine, because that's one of the cool things about the way we do historical knowledge is you find out something and then you make something off of it. It's not exactly beads, but it is a historical, it's a pin made off of a historical illumination. I'm trying to get it to focus. There you go. There's a little archer guy. That's so cute. So anyway, feel free to look through. This is some, this is a chainmail necklace. This was one of my first things. We went to an SCA garage sale that someone was having, and I found this chainmail. It's not as good as John's, but I found this chainmail that someone had, and I put the blue beads between it to make it look like me. And I wore this for many years before I had any, well, I shouldn't say for many years. I wore this until I started getting awards to make my own. But something simple that just looks cool can be very special if you put a memory with it. Not very cool, but not nearly as good as Donna.
It looks cool though. I like how I like the textural contrast between the metal and
Isn't that neat? I think that was very, very fun. This is actually, speaking of, this is something else in my box. This is actually riveted chainmail that John Wayland makes. The real deal, guys, not the twisted stuff that looks cool but isn't what they would have worn. But this is actual, each ring goes over and is riveted individually before another one. So it's not exactly jewelry, but then again, it's made of metal. It is rings. It's functional, but it's also very cool and pretty. As long as it doesn't get rusty. I think your English nights would have gotten rusty. Okay, so since we're showing off, nope, that's Since we're showing off stuff that you might recognize somebody wearing it if you're on tier, this is the Order of the Grey Goose Shaft. And so this medallion is, you can see with the arrows around it, that's the archery and thrown weapons grant level. And you'll notice a lot of people in the arts and sciences community and on tier wearing the grant level Jambe de Lion.
Okay.
It is, it's a little, oh, come on, focus. It's the lion's paw with the checky behind it. So that's the arts and sciences one. Okay, so does anybody have any more questions about beads for Bonnie? Okay.
In front of, is it Zane or Jade?
Zane.
Zane. Those beads right in front of you. Would you pass them here for just a minute? Yeah, I want to share those.
I had a question if it's a good time.
It's a good time.
Okay, so I'm new to SCA and I am making an apron dress and I have the brooches and I ordered some lampwork beads. What's the best way to hang it between the brooches? Would I use chain or cord or wire?
They would have had a metallic attachment that hung from one of the loops or from the back pin.
Mm-hmm.
And that had a hole or multiple holes to hang things on.
Right, I have that.
Okay, so you would hang it from that.
Yes, but what you string the beads on,
Oh, the beads.
partly that depends on how big the holes in your beads are. Some beads, I just used some North beads, and the my first string of North beads, I used beading wire. I actually used 2 strands of 7-string wire and they broke because the beads were too heavy and they rubbed on the wire.
Right.
So I highly suggest a kind of cord, whatever your beads will fit on, but something that's sturdier, probably like a leather cord or even a heavy duty string. But you don't really want to use beading wire unless it's like gargantuanly thick.
And historically it would have been waxed linen or gut.
There you go. There's your historical.
And these are an example of a form of bead that was very common with the Norse. They liked these little bumpy bobbly beads.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of the lampwork beads in like different museums in Europe, but of course, whatever they had stringing them together has decayed. So I didn't know what was the best option for that.
Yeah, modernly you could probably get some wire. There are several wires you can get. Some are just a very thin, tight wire, like a small guitar wire. Others are wrapped and are more abrasive.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on the quality of your bead and how large the bead is, because if it's a tiny bead, it's going to wear through pretty quickly. So the waxed linen is a really good option for historic accuracy. You can get gut from some of the better bead shops.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also sometimes find it in musical instrument shops.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just took a linen spinning class, so I can use one of my samples for that.
Depending on how historically accurate you want to be, you're not required to be historically accurate with what goes inside your beads. So that's entirely up to you. If you just want to use a leather cording type thing, that is totally fine.
Okay, thank you.
You will know that it's what is more historically accurate than that. So if anybody asks you, you can say, this may not be historically accurate, even though we don't actually have examples. We think it might have been this.
Right, because you're new, I'm going to throw this out there. You are not required to be historically accurate as you begin this fun game.
Exactly.
Just make your best effort, you know. Historic accuracy comes with a deeper interest and dedication. We like that. We want that because that's what makes it so fun to research. But you're not required to ever.
Yeah, I went to the Kingdom Arts and Sciences event and I had a lot of unsolicited comments about, you know, the Michaels beads that I was originally using. And I haven't been to a lot of SCA events, so I didn't know, you know, I read online that it's just an attempt to be historically accurate, which I was making. So I'd held off on getting the lampwork beads because I wanted to, you know, maybe get them from somebody local or support somebody's shop that wasn't able to vend during COVID. So
let me just ask, unsolicited as in like negative comments?
yes.
How dare they?
I'm so sorry. That is incredibly inappropriate. That is exactly the thing that we are striving to avoid, and I apologize to you for that having been your experience. That is the kind of forum that can happen in, but that is not what we want to happen. We want to encourage people to learn about things and to be excited about their attempt at whatever level they are attempting at. And if you were wearing garb that you had researched and you strung beads for, you were doing awesome. So continue doing what you're doing. And if someone is rude, then you'll know that they are not what we are going for. Sometimes people learn some things and they're so excited about what they know. They want to share that, but they don't share it in a way that is as gracious or helpful as they should, and therefore they don't get the appreciation for having shared, and you are made to feel that, and that is not what we want to see. So
I second all of that.
Yeah.
And they might be wrong too.
That's
They
also
don't always
true.
know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I've encountered quite a bit of that, but
Yeah.
So just
One of my
come.
One of my favorite ones was somebody who decided to lecture me about historical black work, and pretty obviously had gotten hold of the books that don't have any history in them.
Oh, no. And if you don't know, Anya is an absolute authority with tons of experience in research. She knows, like, she is the authority on black work, actually doing it.
that's cool.
And it is ridiculous when people try to lecture you in the subject that you have studied. But it's more ridiculous that anyone would lecture anyone who is showing up and doing this game, because we're all learning together. And if you ask, so tell me about my beads, what can I do to make them more authentic? Then that's a good time to share. But if they're sharing in a time when it's unsolicited, that's not okay.
Yeah, my first event was Yule this year, and I just have the one set of garb so far. So I just didn't know what the general vibe was. So
I am so sorry. Well, hopefully your next event will give you a better general vibe, because that's tragic. That's exactly, you will. I'll tell you this though. Here's the awesome thing. As you go through your career in the SCA, you'll get to be somebody who said, yeah, so this happened to me and this is what we want to prevent. And instead of being a story we heard about someone else having a bad time, you're the actual bad story. And so you'll get to use that to help other people not be that way in the future.
Great. Well, we have to head out, but thank you so much for answering my question. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
and I'll see you all at Eagles.
Just
Take
know
care.
we're happy if you show up wearing a bath towel as a tabard.
Oh,
Just come play. Put something under the bath towel, please. But we're happy with the bath towel.
I got into SCA because I worked for fiber arts manufacturing companies, and I used to teach classes professionally, and a lot of SCA people were taking classes from me. So once I had a work schedule where I could do SCA, I signed up, but I'm new, so. But the arts and science aspect of it is fun for me.
Well, good. Well, we hope you come back and do a lot more.
All right. Well, thank you. Take care.
Thank you for being here.
I don't know what I should string.
Okay, for stringing, in the top drawer of that white card next to you should be some options for stringing, top or second drawer. We've also got some wire in one of these. And there are needles on the wooden tray that was passed around.
Oh, yeah,
So,
we're-
anyone out there in Zoom land have any more questions for us?
I think Stephen was, has talked about, get some information about.
No question, but a comment.
Open for you.
I've been using book rings to hang my necklaces on a hanger. I put all the ones that I commonly wear together on one book ring. But then I have that hanging in the closet. Otherwise I would have a tangle.
I like that idea. So I hear Stephen might have a comment for us. Stephen, are you still there? Oh, he put it in text. Okay, hang on. Gotta get close to the screen where I can read it with my old eyes.
I'll go ahead and read it. This may be a bit late. However, I had recalled that the word ouch was supposedly derived from the Anglo-Norman nusche. I don't know how to pronounce that. N-U-S-C-H-E. After reading through some papers from the Norwegian Educational Archives, nusche was a word that came from nut or shell to describe a setting for other objects.
Interesting.
It makes
Thank you,
perfect
Stephen.
sense.
Thank you. It does make sense. So I had some notes in my phone, which I've lost. I know it's here somewhere.
Would you like me to give a look around?
It might be on that little table we slid over.
Okay, I see it, it's purple and pink.
Yep.
It is right here.
Oh, I like it.
I've got to be about this side.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
Oh
read it.
dear.
These wood-
Thank you, Dave Johanna.
I found it before I.
And I'll trade you out of here. There's this whole trade.
I don't know why they're-
White one. All right, so this is a gun.
Oh,
So do you need,
yes,
water?
our dear Katherine of the Lakes has sent us a message as well. She said she looked it up in the Wiktionary. And in the Wiktionary, it says from Middle English, ouch from nooch, which Anya found, which in phrases like a nooch was reanalyzed as an ouch, re-bracketing, from Anglo-Norman noosh and Old French noosh,
Me.
with meta-analysis from a Germanic.
I gained out.
So there, Stephen was right. Thank you. Okay. I'm glad you got in, Anya. I'm getting late messages here because I had mislaid my phone.
Okay, Doc. Maybe I should use that.
Oh, did you know there's beads on the couch?
They're plastic.
Ah,
No one wants to play with plastic beads.
not when you have pretty ones.
So did you find stringing items?
Look at the butterfly.
Did you find things to string on, Helen?
I did.
Okay, there's a variety. There should be some small wire. And you found the
I think you have to use
wooden tray.
wire to do the, I was gonna do the freshwater pearls. But they don't fit on the string.
Yeah,
Oh,
there is
we
some
have plenty
fine
of wire, we
string.
have very fine wire, and you're welcome to. it's in
Did
here.
you find, in the very small tray that I put out, there's some fine wire too.
Is this one?
There's
And we
didn't
have-
have.
Yeah, there's some in there.
We have some here and some there, it's pink.
So this will work.
Yeah. There you go. And then I would pass. this
Tori
down.
looks confused.
Well, I don't have a tray,
Oh,
so it's a little hard. to
your
figure
tray
out.
is
Your tray
underneath
is under
the,
your.
the
Oh,
beads.
is it?
bead.
Yes.
That
It's
would
at the beads
explain
on
why I
top.
can't find it.
And I do have some shells down here, but they haven't got holes in them yet.
That's what that's.
I thought I did, but
I believe the space
Um,
for it. So, you guys want to use pink or?
let me see if I can find my notes here.
Mm.
And we'll just chat and enjoy beading as we wait for that.
You want earrings, let me know.
I do.
We're about as informal as it gets tonight. Okay, I found my bling stuff. Found an article that was kind of interesting about Gotland during the Viking Age because, as I said, Adiantum is heavily Norse. Gold coins of any sort were also added to the bling that people wore. And we all know the stories about wearing gold chains as your coinage as you're traveling. And if you needed to stop at an inn and pay for your night and your meal, then a link off the chain might pay your debt. So this is an article from 2017 from Text and Travel, which is a pretty cool research group. Common wisdom that Gotland went its own way during the Viking Age, but that's not because Gotlanders weren't connected. On the contrary, they had a habit of collecting things that showed just how connected they were. Thin soil on this rocky isle allowed archaeologists to uncover more than 168,000 coins from the Viking Age. All the more remarkable since no one in Scandinavia was making coins at this time. Many of the Gotland coins still bear the marks showing when and where they were made, indicating that this idiosyncratic island was tied to trade routes spanning North Africa, Western Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia. This is part of what I was alluding to with Catherine's presentation for us. Items that were created in Egypt easily traveled to Africa, and the trade routes between Europe and Africa were pretty busy, and the Norse were a big part of that. I'm going to just read some of this article because I found it interesting. And we have beaters fervently working. When did Gotland become a hub for this trade? And did these routes exist before the silver fever of the late 800s? This is where glass becomes important. During the early medieval period, almost all glass was produced solely in the Near East, Egypt, the Levant, Syria, and Iran. But it was used all over, including on Gotland. If Gotland glass looked different from the rest of Scandinavia prior to the 870s, then we have a sure indicator that Gotlanders were forging eastward connections before they developed their hunger for silver. To this end, I've examined 2,500 beads from Gotland and still counting. And here's some of my initial observations. To begin with, Gotland beads looked a lot like the rest of the Baltic during the Vendel period preceding the Viking Age. That's an important baseline because it shows that as the Iron Age transitioned into the Viking Age, people around the Baltic were largely consumers feeding off a single market, albeit one that was dispersed and had few, if any, major hubs. But Gotlanders did have local pride, and they fashioned beads made from some of the fossils found readily in the limestone bedrock that made up much of the island. So they were using stone and fossils. They made cylinders from the stems of ancient sea lilies, and they ground medium-sized round beads from the coral reefs that had been home to the world's first vertebrates. These beads are relatively rare in other places, at least throughout the Western Baltic, which I know best, reinforcing the impression that Iron Age Gotlanders were entering long-distance markets as consumers rather than as producers of exotic goods. They abandoned the cylinder beads perhaps before 700, although other fossil beads continued in use through the Viking Age. There's a photograph here that I will take to the camera for these beads made from fossils. The beads on the bottom string are very much like beads that I found as a child in Texas in the desert. And they were fossilized sea plants or stems of plants. That photograph was Vendel period beads from Gotland from 540 to 660. The white cylinder beads, which were the bottom row, were common in the Gotland limestone. Too warm, Dory?
Yeah, having a hot flash.
Sorry. No, it's okay. The unworked fossils at the front still have the appearance of plant stems, but the beads have been ground and polished into the smooth white appearance that Vendel period Gotlanders seem to have preferred. The round white beads were mostly made from tabulate coral fossils, which often turn a buttery yellow when lit with a strong light. So in the early 700s, new trading sites began to appear across southern Scandinavia at places like Ribe and Aarhus. At first, these were mere trading camps set up seasonally. Later, they became more permanent towns for craft work and exchange. Bead workers lived in these towns, and their products traveled north among the elite communities living in what is now Sweden. But I've seen very few of these beads in Gotland. This tells us not only that Gotland was peripheral to the economic expansion that was tying the Baltic closer to Western Europe during the Merovingian. Yes, thank you, yes, that word, and Carolinian transition. It tells us also that pre-Viking Age Gotlanders didn't depend on these networks for access to glass. They must already have had some access via non-Western routes, probably still making use of the dispersed networks that had been their bases for exchange throughout much of the Vendel period. There's another photograph I'm going to share here from 725 to 760. Beads from the Ribe Postusit excavation. These were made and lost at a seasonal campground for craft workers in Western Denmark. Is that focused?
No, pull it away further a little bit.
No, it goes bad if I go away. Say when. It's just not working. Okay. So the blue beads decorated with red and white and sometimes yellow were made primarily in Ribe and later in Aarhus in southern Sweden. They occasionally spread to elite sites northward through Sweden, though I've seen very few in the collections on Gotland. Even as Western craftsmen and merchants were increasingly sailing into the Baltic, Gotlanders looking for trade must have been seeking other routes. The only site where these new Scandinavian-made beads appeared in appreciable numbers seems to have been in Pavakin, which is a trading site established on Gotland's west coast as early as 750. Imports from 750 to 800 were primarily restricted to the generic colors of green, white, and blue. These colors appear not only dominant among the finds of Pavakin, but also as the exclusive elements of bead assemblages in other places as well. For example, an elite grave at the old cemetery of Eyre on Gotland's east coast included melted beads of green, white, and blue, and it should probably be dated to this period. Likewise, these colors make up the entire palette of the molten beads found near the Frugel picture stone, indicating that this otherwise undated monument was probably set up at about the same time in the years just prior to 800. So when we're selecting our beads for a particular persona, it's important to know what colors were available in which geographic locations. Beads from the trading town of Pavakin show increasing similarities to the west, beginning in the early 800s. Bead making may already have been abandoned in Northern Europe at that time, but the growing trading hubs were developing more or less direct connections with the Near East. Previously, most beads had been made from molten glass that had been wrapped around metal mandrels, but the new beads were made from glass that had been drawn or blown into tubes and then formed into a desirable shape like small discs or multiple segments joined by narrow waists, similar to what Katherine of the Lakes was sharing with us. Distribution patterns suggest this technique might have been practiced solely near the primary production centers around the Eastern Mediterranean. Hedeby in southern Jutland was probably a main point of entry for these beads into the Baltic networks, with Birka in central Sweden and Trousseau in northern Poland as regional redistribution hubs. Hawken was also able to shunt off some of this trade between Hedeby and Birka with what appears to have been an increasing degree of success for a short period after 830. Notably, similar beads have also been found around a pair of picture stones at Buhel, suggesting that these stones were also raised perhaps around 850. So I'm going to put a link under this event that will lead you to that article because it's filled with a lot more information. Silence. We're all beating and drinking water.
I'm really excited about that though, because I was looking at the Kersey, the last, we were actually just watching about the last pagan Baltic folks. And so they were talking about that they had like a special task force of folks that had come through, and Columbus was talking about that the beads across the chest had partly to do with before Christianity. They went to the necklaces instead.
A spiritual thing?
Yeah, changed, fashion changed with some of that. And so it's interesting, because I was really interested in the, I wish I had watched it. It was like Ireland, Irish to Finland or something that the video I can post it up in the chat that talked about, it's very violent imagery though, that talked about the Baltic peoples and the specifically these the last group that was kind of over there in that area to Christianize. So it's really, it was a lot longer.
Yeah, one of the things that you'll find on almost all the Norse images that I've seen is that the beading on, say, an apron dress wasn't just beads. It also had tokens of some sort, and they used wire and made a spiral disc that was often included. There was almost a figure 8. Alan?
Don't forget the ear spoon.
Ah, yes, the ear spoon and the toothpicker.
I made an ear spoon out of bronze at the university, and the people in the studio were concerned that this was drug paraphernalia. I had to show them photos of the original item and what museum it was from. And they said, well, I suppose that's permitted then.
Oh, that's funny. What time period was that? When did you do that?
That was part of the regalia that I handed, the prizes I handed out in 2019. So it was probably
not so long ago.
No, not too long ago.
Interesting. Yes, they had, because they were not the unclean people that we see in the movies, they were really quite fastidious. They carried an ear spoon and a toothpick and a nail cleaner on their, often on their, like a chatelaine that hung from the turtle brooch or the loops on the apron.
One of the most common grave finds for both genders would be the hair comb.
Yes, not to be forgotten.
So, you know, the portrayal in Hollywood is slanderous at best.
Yeah. And the hair comb was interesting to me. Just like our modern combs have a fine side and a not quite so fine side, they too made a double-edged comb, one with very fine tines and the other not quite so fine. I've heard them described as a lice comb, but I don't think that was the purpose. Because our modern combs are still made that way, and I don't believe we're doing it to find lice. I'm not anyway.
Some folks just have really fine hair.
Yeah, that's right. So what was the name of the young lady that we lost early on, that left just a bit ago?
Cat.
Kate, yeah.
Cat Perry, I think.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing her at Eagles.
Yeah.
A lot of focused beading going on here.
We gotta get to the tiny people that are on Zoom to show us that they are beating what they were.
Yes, anyone out there? Stephen, are you beading? Alan, Anya, what are you guys working on tonight? Crickets.
I'm working on Hobbit John's heraldry.
Yay, I'm gonna be so excited.
She planted herself back there in the corner under the light.
Yes, heraldry coming.
Ooh, nice.
Some pro beads.
Oh, that's very pretty.
Fancy bling.
Yeah.
This is what I just did.
Ooh, I like that.
When did I do this show?
Yeah, you can. Gonna bring that over and share it with you.
It's an earring.
Yeah, seed pods were another thing that were used quite often.
Don't know if it'll focus or not.
Back a little bit, maybe.
Hmm.
That's very nice.
But what is it?
So one of the things that I know about beads is that the exported glass from Egypt was not always exported as a bead. It was often exported as a small lump of glass that was then melted and turned into beads on site wherever it was bought. I know that from research.
No, I didn't know that.
Ah.
That's really interesting.
How do I know that? I read it somewhere.
No, I
Somewhere
didn't know that.
trustworthy.
I didn't know that. That's so good. No idea.
And it makes sense because
It does.
If
Glass
you-
is very precious.
and if you think about transporting a pouch full of tiny little seed beads across the desert, and
Or anything, yeah.
yeah, you're gonna lose some, but a
Yeah.
chunk of glass, that could be wrapped up and transported.
Plus, it doesn't matter if it breaks if you're gonna turn it into something.
Right.
No.
A lot of your Viking beads were made out of salvaged glass because silicon sand is hard to find up there. So they would go digging through Roman rubbish tips or middens. They say, "Oh, look at this! I think we could use this." They'd pack that off home, melt it down, and turn it into beads.
Now, see, I didn't know that silicon sand was hard to find up there. That's a piece I did not know.
My favorite reading session ever. It's talking about talking.
Cool.
I second that.
You know, what's fun about this is it counts as homeschool when you teach your kids. Especially
So
if you go home and write down the things that you remember them saying, or any questions that you think about later.
she's discussing over there about homeschooling and using this as a credit for class. So one of the things that I wish I could remember the name of, Alan may know or Anya, these spiral, almost a spring of wire. If I can find something to, were used not only as beading, but as decoration on clothing. A long section would be made and then snips of it cut off and put on the clothing. And Anya, do you know the name, or Alan, what is the name of those? Dame J, do you know?
Just wire coil.
So sorry.
Say
Just
again?
wire coil.
Wire coil. I thought it had another name.
It could be.
A Viking era thing, or is it later period?
I saw it used predominantly by the Norse and in Gotland, wasn't it?
I'd have to check. I think I've seen
It's a
some
particular area.
in King Tut's tomb. Anywhere you've got wires, somebody's going to say, I wonder what would happen if I twist this wire around this mandrel here.
But to use it as ornamentation, like I know I've seen it on the aprons of the Norse that were found in tombs along the edges and things. And one of the particular era of the Norse. Let's see if I can find that. I hate to give a half idea of something I kind of remember. See if I can find details. We have another necklace to show coming together.
I know you said asymmetrical, but my OCD brain cannot do it.
That's okay,
I cannot.
you're doing an attempt at.
I love
But you know,
you've
if
got
you
the
know that, see,
shells.
That's something you know. That's
Yeah.
historical knowledge.
So as I was just like thinking about what all these might be and mean, and you know, maybe my persona person is a really particular person that would have arranged them in such a way. Anyhow, very
There you
methodical. So
That's very cool.
I wonder if there were OCD Norsemen who couldn't do it asymmetrically. You know?
it's entirely possible. Maybe they arranged them by size.
Anytime you have a system.
You know, maybe.
So, but I'm sure they arranged them and rearranged them.
I bet you they rearranged them. I bet I knew
So I'm
that.
totally curious, something that I was told when I first joined, I have not heard brought up tonight, and I'm totally curious because I listen to a lot, but I don't do the research myself very often. So I was told that the Norse used beads as money. And that they would go, and that's one of the reasons they were wearing the strings of beads was because they were so valuable they could use them as money for trade when they went to. So it was like they were carrying their grocery money with them.
Were you able to hear that on the Zoom?
I don't have the historical documentation myself, but that's what I heard in the class about Norse beads. So somebody else could check that out and find out if they have more information about that particular.
Were you able to hear that on the Zoom? Dame Johanna is speculating about.
Not really.
She was speculating about.
Oh, I'm not speculating.
But she was repeating what she's heard.
That's right.
That the Norse used beads as money.
I mean, I think it's part of
And that's why they wore them. Is because
She
they were
says that's
wearing
why they
them.
wore these big necklaces. That was their money worn around them.
But that's, I mean, I didn't do the research myself, so I don't have like a research.
She can't confirm that, but she has been told that.
That's what I was told when I started looking at Norse stuff. And
Yeah, I can go and address some of that. Coinage as we know it now was not practiced in the Scandinavian countries during the Viking era. What coins we have would have been stolen from what is now France and Italy and places like that. It was often used as ornamentation. You just put a hole in it, sew it on something you were wearing. Like most of your civilizations, you would tend to wear a lot of your wealth. I mean, it wasn't just the Vikings by any means. The Vikings in particular were fond of having silver bracelets, and they would take the silver bracelets and, if the bargaining went their way, then they would say, okay, you get half of this. And so that was called hack silver, where you take the silver bracelet and literally hack it to bits and say, okay, you can have these bits and I keep the other bits. It wouldn't surprise me, but the Vikings were traders. They're known as warriors, but very much they're also interested in trading sometimes maybe stuff that they didn't come by legally. I'm not going to say, But so there was being no common coinage. It was all barter. So, if you saw a cow that you liked, you might ask your wife if she would turn over some of her her beads in trade for the cow. I mean, so yeah, I would say that beads were a form of currency, but I would not say it was exclusive currency. In your Native American tribes, some of your Native American tribes, beads were pretty much the exclusive coin of the realm. They might trade for, iron knives or something like that, but beads was the go-to thing. But with the Vikings, pretty much, if you had something that they were interested in, they'd be willing to sit down and toss objects onto the blanket until you came to an agreement.
Ah, the trade blanket goes back a long way and goes
back a long way.
Yeah. So the using beads as money is a founded thing.
There you go.
I was talking about the spiral metal. Here is an example of a Finnish spiral mantle. It was on a man's mantle, and it had bronze spirals woven into the weave of the fabric. So they had bling on the clothes. So it takes deep thought to assemble necklaces, or earrings, or.
I did post an article in the chat section. It's not specific to your wire coils though, but wire jewelry in general.
I will save this chat and put the link for it in the discussion under this event, as well as the YouTube. Thank you for sharing that, Alan. It's handmadeartists.com, a brief history of ancient jewelry. Wire. Nice. Okay, are you wearing it? You could do a half length and fasten it from your turtle brooch, from your apron.
No, this is for Elizabethan court dress.
What
you can do.
Smaller stones at the top, maybe.
That's what I think I'll
It's
do.
all of from the
Just do
shoulder back.
pearls.
From the shoulder back, you can do smaller.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna need to, because it's like getting really heavy now.
Yeah.
Beads are
It's
heavy.
Gorgeous. I mean, oh darn.
It's sparkly.
What do we do with the other half of the end?
Oh, darn, this only two-
She's worrying it's getting too heavy to wear.
There you go. There's extra beads.
Oh, golly.
Anya, what are you working on tonight?
They are really pretty. This will actually be beautiful.
I was just thinking that.
She may have fallen asleep on us
And it's pearls. Yeah, like
or been pulled away from the computer.
I think of you every time I wear it.
Alan's been at the pottery shop. He posted pictures earlier today. Those were nice bowls and mugs, Alan.
Yay, we need bowls and knives, Alan.
I took Dame Joanna inside, and Dame Joanna being Dame Joanna immediately grabs one of the teachers and extracts information from the teacher about how the teacher is interested in medieval cooking and drawing charters and calligraphy and stuff like that. Dame Joanna says, "Oh, well, we have an event coming up you might very well be interested in."
I'm mistaken for someone else and made a friend. This is not unusual.
So I have a pottery question.
Yes.
So at the event, we bought a mug, and it's stoneware, but it has a lot of really intense kind of bumps in it that the glaze was either very thin or something that and it didn't get they didn't get sanded off. And so when I washed it, last night. It definitely chunked up my hand, which is why I'm all bandaged.
Oh.
So I'm very sad. So I know that sometimes you can sand those down, and maybe we could, but it's on the inside. So I'm wondering if we could put like a clear glaze and refire that. Do you think? To like, I don't know. I just wanna. He really likes this cup. He's been looking for a cup for years since his favorite mug got broken by a friend of ours. And so I'm just wondering, what might we be able to do to make this cup safe?
Well, a second firing is always possible, but there's always risks.
Yeah.
If you were to try sanding it, the glaze is actually just a form of glass, so it's really tough stuff. And if you were to do such a thing, I would suggest doing it underwater, because powdered glass is just amazingly toxic.
Right.
You do not want that in your lungs.
Full agreement.
But you have to be very careful, because sometimes the glaze will just stick out like, razor blades or something that's just as charming and friendly.
Yeah.
I have seen that there is some kind of a pottery that is intentionally fired twice with glaze to get a different finish on it. That's all I remember about it, but it was specifically intentionally fired
That is
twice
true.
with glaze.
Yeah, second firing, and you can get very interesting effects off of that.
Or you can have a shattered
Yes, you
bowl,
can end
right?
up with bits and pieces of wreckage.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's when they started making mosaics, There are some pretty things being made here at this table.
I have some amethyst beads if anybody wants.
Amethyst, wow, pretty.
That's what I'm doing
It's
right now.
not too bad if it's just the one.
So stone, shells, bone, teeth,
Mm-hmm.
glass, metal. Just about anything you can think of became bling.
I'm blinging over here. I'm really blinging.
You are.
I don't know if you can hear her, Alan, but she says she's blinging over there. She's really blinging.
I'm really blinging.
Oof, sorry I vanished like that. One of my chickadees was here. I haven't seen him for 4 years.
Aw.
One of the if you ever see me write about Brandon in the Ozatroar, in the house newsletter, that was who was just here. All the way from Alaska.
Oh,
Wow. Is he staying for a while or?
Nope, just for a trip. He's in Washington visiting family for a week, and he'd made a special trip to come down here and see me.
Oh. Well, if I'd been you, I'd have just turned us off and spent time with him.
seriously.
Well, that's why I vanished for a bit.
Oh, yeah. For sure. That's the person to be seeing today.
Down the bottom. Oh.
Are you thinking about the fact that the recording is still going?
Yeah, it's a good reminder. I think we're done talking about important things, aren't we? Nobody wants to hear our chit chat, do they?